Well, the important thing is that the constitutional process of the peaceful transfer of power continued despite this despicable attack on the Congress and on the Constitution. That's the important takeaway from all of this.
When it comes to something like that, a lot of people now are talking about what do we do next? Are we concerned about the president's behavior in the next couple of weeks? What do you think?
Well, what we saw at the Capitol on Wednesday is the latest culmination of something we've been watching in this country now for the last 4 or 5 years. I began seeing it when our town hall meetings, which were always respectful, civil exchanges of different viewpoints and ideas, became shouting matches where individuals shouted down people whose opinions they didn't like. We saw this past year how violence has become a instrument of political change, and ultimately that culminated with what happened on Wednesday.
What about the calls to invoke the 25th Amendment or impeachment? What do you think about those?
Haven't we done enough damage to our Constitution? Haven't we done enough to divide our country without going any further? The 25th Amendment is specifically written to address the physical incapacity of the president, not bad conduct.
Okay, and are you afraid that, all of these, well, a lot of people are talking about damage to democracy. What do you think?
I think the greatest damage we could ever do to democracy in this country is to torture and abuse our Constitution the way it's been proposed by both sides. The president was dead wrong. Congress cannot pick and choose which electoral votes it wants to count and which ones it doesn't want to count. And Pelosi and their crowd are absolutely wrong that the 25th Amendment or impeachment is applicable in this circumstance.
Okay. Now, I know you've been asked about this a lot, so I don't want to linger on it much more, but I do want to talk about this conference that's going on today that a lot of people in our area are talking about, and you're speaking tonight. So what message will you be trying to send? It's the Reopen Cal Now Public Policy Conference. Okay. What message will you be trying to send?
We have to restore our fundamental rights as Americans, the freedom to peaceably assemble, the freedom to speak out, the freedom to petition our government for redress of grievances. And the freedom to be secure from being denied our lives, liberty, or property without due process of law. Those are fundamentals in our Bill of Rights that have been completely shredded by these bureaucratic lockdown orders that have destroyed our economy, have destroyed the livelihoods of millions of Americans, and have utterly failed to stop the spread of this disease. They've been very, very effective, though, at costing lives, increased suicides, drug and alcohol related deaths, domestic homicides, delayed health screenings, delayed health treatments, and general poverty related deaths as we have plunged millions of Americans into poverty.
Obviously, we all know kind of the approach the state's taken so far, but what is the right approach or the smarter approach to this?
I think Sweden got it right. You protect the most vulnerable, and you give the best advice you possibly can to the population, and then trust them to make their own decisions based upon their own need and circumstances. The death rate in Sweden is now 200 per million below that of the United States. I just checked those numbers today. That would mean 66,000 fewer deaths from COVID in the United States if we had the same morbidity that Sweden has had, largely keeping its society open.
And what if we continue to go down the path that we're currently going down?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see an entire generation denied education for another, however long this lasts. I think we're going to see a continuing dystopian world of despair, of unemployment, and of increasing poverty. The UN recently warned that globally, the effect of these lockdowns, it could cost as many as 130 million deaths to starvation around the world. That's particularly ironic, since the first and most ancient principle of medicine is first, do no harm.
Okay, I did want to, well, actually, one more question regarding that. Is there government overreach right now?
Yes, our fundamental rights under the Bill of Rights have been shredded. The role of the legislature has been pushed aside by executive edicts. And we know from the example of the people issuing these edicts, they don't believe in them. They violate them whenever it pleases them.
We have seen plenty of examples of that. So one thing, and I'm not saying that you created the site for this conference, but one of the main things that it says is, you know, COVID-19, it's true, but they aren't telling you the whole story, exclamation point. So what is the public not being told about?
Among other things, they're not being told the CDC's own numbers on the virulence of this disease. If you're under 50, according to the CDC's best estimate, your recovery rate is 99.98%. It's a nasty bug. I don't mean to discount it, but it's certainly not the bubonic plague. It's not even the Spanish flu. And it doesn't justify the enormous damage that's been done to people's livelihoods and to the very fabric of our society.
Okay, and I'm sure it's not news to you that some people are finding even having this conference to be controversial. What would you say to people who think that?
You know, controversy is protected by our First Amendment. The left seems to forget that.
Yeah. But what would you say to people who are going to criticize this event? What would you say?
Don't come. If you think the risks are too great, don't come. Stay in your homes. No one's going to criticize you for doing that. My mother's 90 years old. She's at high risk for this, and she's been very careful about staying at home. It should be up to individual citizens exercising their own judgment according to their own circumstances to make these decisions. Government has an important role to play in giving its best advice, but the orders that it has issued that have caused so much devastation to our society, that is not within their legitimate power or the legitimate power of any free society.